on, waiters.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cupcake Media. If you don't know, well, you probably know by now, but Afghanistan has fallen to the hands of the Taliban in a matter of just like 1 to 2 weeks. This is really heartbreaking news because 20 years, trillions of dollars were spent to modernize a country and show them democracy. And trillions of dollars were spent to help a society become better. Billions were spent with the local government of Afghanistan to modernize their army. We gave them the best training. It was all for nothing. And I think it's so embarrassing because I know a lot of servicemen and women who fought in Afghanistan are probably feeling like we lost this war. And they have every right to feel like that. And it's okay. And in some respects, yes, we did lose part of the war and we did win a part of the war. While our cupcake president is going to probably lie to all of us and the world as to why we had to pull out, let's go into what happened in Afghanistan. The previous president of the United States, President Trump, signed a peace treaty with the Taliban to give us 14 months to withdraw our troops from Afghanistan safely. The deal was they would not attack U.S. personnel. President Biden, in many ways, wanted to uphold that deal, okay? But he could have maybe skirted around it by maintaining an international peacekeeping force. Technically, it wouldn't violate the deal. We said we were going to pull out. But if we kept the international peacekeeping force under the guise of the UN, it might have made things better. Now, there is an argument to say that the country could have been split. And there's a couple ways to look at this. If the country got split and you had a Taliban stronghold area and a non-Taliban stronghold area, the only way the Taliban area would collapse is if the people there live in such misery and their economic plight is so bad that they start fleeing the country or they turn against their leaders. Think of East Berlin and East Germany. People would flee East Berlin and East Germany, go into the West because they were tired of living in poverty, okay? And they were hungry. The other side is if they're able to maintain a strong leadership command, like let's say Kim Jong-un's North Korea, and suppress any will of the people, well, whoever remains there just doesn't want to get killed, so they'll go to their day-to-day activities. And that would allow for a much worse scenario because now you have a safe area where this extremist ideology and like cruel dictatorship would allow itself to flourish. So we start pulling out of Afghanistan not too long ago, and it was too soon, too quick. It really was. This lesson in history should teach the United States that we must rewrite our entire playbook when it comes to conducting war, how to win a war, and how to build a nation. The United States from day one failed miserably in nation building in Afghanistan. The Taliban were present, they knew what to do, and it never helped us for every time that we blew up a mosque in some remote village and we killed a bunch of kids, that the Taliban were there to rebuild the mosque. So who do you think they're going to get aligned to? Okay? These things are not good. When we rebuilt Germany and Japan, we were not blowing up Buddhist shrines in the middle of like Ginza or Okinawa or, Hokkaido. No, we were rebuilding the entire nation. We earned the respect and the trust of the people. It is how you conquer a nation. Yes, you'll have resistance, but when you make people flourish, they will embrace you. That is why Germany and Japan, who got pulverized during World War II, are strong U.S. allies to this day. So we failed at nation building. What the news won't tell you is how Afghanistan collapsed so quick. Let's first start with some basics. The Taliban had a force of 80,000 troops. The Afghan military had a force of 300,000 plus troops with special commandos, special units, very well trained by the U.S. government and other forces, billions spent in training these people. So essentially, the Afghan army outnumbered the Taliban by 4-1. So 4-1, okay? They easily could have just held their ground and kept fighting, but no, that did not happen. As the United States starts pulling out, the Taliban start making their advance. They start from the north and they start going south. They literally encircled Kabul in a matter of just days from their initial stage of recapturing the country. But what happened, you ask? Well, let me tell you what happened. You had multiple provincial leaders, from governors and mayors, police force, military personnel, all rejoicing that the Taliban were coming back. They aligned themselves with the Taliban. So here's another failure of our intelligence services. Once again, we knew where these people were aligned to. We knew what they wanted, yet we did nothing about it, and we just somehow enabled this to happen. The Taliban have had 20 years to study U.S. military tactics that they will now share with our nemesis. And the United States must fire everybody from the Secretary of Defense to most of our intelligence service heads immediately, because this is the biggest form of blowback we have ever seen in U.S. history. There are photos that I've seen of Afghan military members rejoicing in joy in Kabul over the weekend as the Taliban were approaching Kabul. They were happy. So let's just recap this. How did they capture the country so quick? Well, on the one side, you have provincial leaders and governors and mayors, heads of police forces, military personnel, all rejoicing at the fact that the Taliban were coming back. It's like they've literally waited 20 years and Santa Claus for them has come, and they're like ecstatic about it. They didn't fight. They didn't even try fighting. So when there is no resistance, right, what do you think is going to happen? Some of the other issues that a lot of people don't know about is that the now defunct president of Afghanistan with two of his top aides, and I apologize, I don't remember their names, but these three are known as like the three rulers of Afghanistan. These three have been known to be extremely corrupt, withholding money, taking a lot of the money from the Afghan people, and instead of allocating money to, allocating things to essential resources, they just kept it for themselves. Now, how this idiot got reelected, I have no idea, okay? People voted for him twice, but they knew these things about him. So this doesn't help. So from what I've been told is that the Afghan military has not been paid in months. The head of the Afghan forces has said that their attrition rate was astronomically terrible. For every 500 new recruits that they were receiving, they were losing about 3,000 to 5,000 Afghan military personnel who are abandoning their posts and going AWOL, essentially. Okay? That's not good. So you have a complete failure in a chain of command. It is obvious that the Afghan government did not have a proper chain in command in place. They were still running this country, even though it's supposed to be a democracy, as if it was a group of tribal nations. The military, with or without a proper chain of command, if they were trained well, and they did learn about chain of command, would have completely at one point stepped in and overtaken all daily activities to prevent this overtaking of Afghanistan by the Taliban. But that did not happen. Why did it not happen? Well, they were discontented that they were not paid. So there was no love for their country. There's no love for their people. These military personnel did not hate the Taliban. They liked them. Because think about it. If you did not want to go back to a system that you absolutely hated, regardless if you were paid or not, you would have fought for it. Your generals would have been given instructions. Your military would have put up a fight. And we would not be where we are today. And maybe at the end of all that, you go and do a coup d'etat, take over the government, and hold special elections if need be. But none of that happened. The Afghan military was nowhere to be seen. I mean, like I said, we received photos of Afghan military personnel in Kabul walking around like on Saturday and Sunday with their guns, rejoicing that the Taliban were taking over the country. They were happy. They were waiting for them. And this is going to have serious repercussions. Because on one side, the Taliban have been studying our tactics for 20 years silently. Okay? On the other side, we have trained a modern army with our most up-to-date knowledge of warfare, who will now share this knowledge with the Taliban, who will now export all of our training and our techniques to our nemesis, like China. This is not going to go good for the United States. We need to rewrite our playbook. Let's see. Oh, as of 24 hours ago. Whatever our plans are in defending the United States and displaying, dominance throughout the world has to stop. We got to call everyone home at this point. And we need to have a major regroupthink, and a new strategy that has never been tested. But we know this, whatever we've been using since the Vietnam War has failed miserably, time and time and again and again. It is time to stop using that old textbook. So that's why we keep saying everyone from the Secretary of Defense to the heads of intelligence agencies must all be fired, except for the DIA. Those guys know what they're doing for the most part. So back to Afghanistan. You had no resistance. You had no love for people that truly loved their nation and cared about their people. No one put up a fight. The military, the police, these people deep inside, psychologically, were all Taliban. You had the provincial governors and mayors all joining the Taliban in taking over their territories. So these people were all Taliban. So this isn't good. So it's not a shock that the Taliban took over. It shouldn't be a shock, but all these things were withheld from most people in the world. The reality is that, yes, we should have had some type of small contingency force based around Afghanistan with international partners to ensure that the country could still find a way to mature and grow. But they were not ready at all. And that's kind of bad, right? Because they've had 20 years to get themselves ready, and they were not ready at all. What does that say? Seriously, what does that say about where we were? I think from a philosophical side, the thing that Americans have to understand is not everyone wants democracy. Not everyone wants freedom. One of the dumbest, stupidest thoughts we ever had in the late 90s, early 2000s was everyone assumed in the U.S. government that as China became more affluent and wealthier and educated, that people would embrace democracy. But Chinese people don't want democracy because they see India, who is the closest country to them in terms of geography and demographics and size. And they see how poor Indians are and how backwards India is compared to China, and how much poorer as a nation India is as compared to China. So they don't want democracy. And we've been fueling this giant beast, this giant dragon beast in the East that's been getting bigger and bigger every day. And so this same ideology is what led to the failures of Afghanistan. People think that the Afghan people wanted democracy. No, they did not. They did not. They did not want any type of democracy. And I know that comes as a shocker, but when I speak with people who are near that region, they give a very, very different story. Let's go into history class a little bit on Education Street. What a lot of people don't know is that Afghanistan used to be part of the Iranian Empire. And up until about, I want to say 100, 200 years ago, it was still part of Iran. The country got sold under the Qajar dynasty because that king was a complete idiot and sold many lands of Iran for free. So when I speak and I hear things from Iranian personnel in Iran, they tell me the biggest mistake that Americans had was this idea that the Taliban went away. No, they were always there. Their supporters were lying in wait. Because the reality is that the Afghan governments have been there since Karzai to this idiot who just fled, have been nothing but corrupt people who have raped and pillaged their entire country. I want to give a very clear example. It doesn't help when the United States would blow up a mosque through an airstrike, killing a bunch of kids. We don't say sorry for it. We don't even rebuild the mosque to make it better. But then the Taliban come in and rebuild the mosque. Who do you think those people are going to align themselves with? The United States and Afghan forces or the Taliban? The Taliban won this war because of an ideology. They won this war because they won the hearts and minds of people. The United States lost this war because we went in there with the assumption that the country that we invaded, that the people wanted democracy. But they did not. They absolutely did not. Maybe in 50 years it would have happened if we were to have nation-built Afghanistan like we did with Germany and Japan, and those are countries that we destroyed during World War II, yet their people show a lot of love and appreciation towards us because we rebuilt them from day one. We can't win the hearts and minds of people when we treat them bad and when we don't rebuild their nation. It has never worked in the course of history. When you look at successful empires and countries that dominate another country, the ones that always succeed are the ones that go in there not as conquerors, but as saviors. And what is the difference? A conqueror goes in there to rape and pillage a country. A savior goes in there to change a system, use essential people from within the system to bring positive change and to bring affluency and wealth and a better standard of living, which would make people see the light. But in Afghanistan, no one ever saw the light. They just saw how bad things always were. So this is where we failed. We failed because we were under the assumption that people there truly wanted to have democratically elected elections. They did not. You might be seeing images of people scrambling for their lives in Kabul. Yes, those are people who truly wanted it. But for the most of the country, there was no fight. No one fought. The Afghan military could have easily held their ground. Maybe they would have lost 3 to 5 provinces. Not the entire country in a matter of days. There's a lot to be said when the president of a country is so corrupt that his military does not want to fight. The writing was on the wall. We just ignored to believe it. We ignored to act on it. We ignored to make proper decisions. So where do we go from here? I think when we study the region of Afghanistan and we hear what neighboring countries have to say about it, this is going to have huge ramifications throughout the Middle East and Africa. The ideology war is something that Western nations are going to lose. You're going to see a lot of dominance coming in from China because they're going to capitalize on this heavily. Don't be surprised if you see Chinese building military bases in Afghanistan. I think the U.S. military and the U.S. government has to fundamentally reshape their politics with the country of Iran. Because if China goes into Afghanistan, the U.S. needs to go into Iran, make some peace treaties with them, say sorry, right? Because there are things that we did very, very wrong against the Iranians, such as breaking negotiating deals that were signed internationally, imposing terrible sanctions on a country that, after all this time, doesn't deserve it, and really readjusting their geopolitics to that area. Because if they don't go into Iran, it's going to pose a lot of threat to other countries in the Middle East. I think one of our biggest misconceptions is that we have to stop assuming everyone wants democracy. We have to stop believing that right now. This ideology has failed since the Vietnam War. And if you don't want to go that far back in history, Look at Iraq and look at Afghanistan. We went in there, we tried to give democracy, and it never worked. The United States is unique because it was the first country in the world where we became this experiment where we rebelled against the British Empire and said, we want just common folk ruling us because we think that, taxation without representation is tyranny. We think that when the common folk are here, we're going to better understand that if we represent ourselves, we will know what's best for our country versus, the king or the queen who's across the pond and doesn't know what's going on here. Very similar to the United States right now. You have a Congress which is like 85 years old, in which whom our elected officials don't represent the United States in any shape, way, or form. For example, you have a Congress that is so old that they don't even know how to use Waze on their phones. You have a Congress that is so old that geographically, they don't represent what we look like even ethnically. And that's just the truth. So when our own Congress is not a proper representation of us in terms of diversity, age, race, sex, how are we supposed to go help a country which embraces extremism, which embraces fundamentalism, and tell them, we're going to come show you how to do democracy, when we are right now trying to fix our shit show of what we call democracy? We have two states, California and New York, which are more communistic and dictatorial than Kim Jong-un of North Korea, and people here fail to see it. And then we go, oh my God, why is it that they would elect the Taliban? Because when we fail to see our own mistakes, when we fail to see the collapse of democracy in the United States, then it should be of no surprise when other people in other countries do not see that their government is extreme and fundamental, that they actually might like what they have over there. Because when we are failing at our job of preserving our democracy and our freedoms, how the hell are we supposed to export it? It's not a good business plan, is it? In Afghanistan, with the corruption that was going on, with the lack of funds that were not being provided to the military and the police, because this just came in on one of our texts from one of our staff members, which is, why do you think they didn't fight, even though they didn't get paid? And I'm just going to re-say it. It's because the Taliban were waiting. And most of these people they didn't forget the Taliban. They were always there in the shadows. They were deeply aligned with them. They were very heavily aligned with them. Maybe outside of maybe in Kabul and their two other large cities, maybe their people were not for the Taliban, but for all those other provinces, especially southern Afghanistan that borders Pakistan, and in the north where the Taliban still had a strong presence, the people there, they still remember them from 20 years ago. They still remember them from pre-9/11. This is all they know. This is their vanilla ice cream. They like what they're comfortable with. And you could see truly where their hearts were. Because if they didn't like the Taliban, they would have fought. Somebody would have fought. Nobody fought. And when mayors and heads of police and the military and governors are all cheering for the Taliban, embracing them as they come in, it should show you that they've been waiting for this day for a long time. This has been planned. It's like as if they knew that this would happen. And I think that's the thing that the news won't talk about. The United States can talk all about why we needed to pull out, but the way we did it was stupid, childish, and extremely, extremely careless. We should have spent more time in there. We should have really just built a contingency force with international partners and made it an international peacekeeping mission. I think the United Nations has to reevaluate what their role is in the world because they haven't done anything for us other than make up silly articles about climate change. Now let's talk about the humanitarian crisis and change that is going on globally. What have they done for it? The United Nations gets vast amounts of military funding, and they have this useless military which doesn't do anything. They call them peacekeeping troops that don't do anything. We really need to reevaluate what the UN's role is in the world, because I didn't see them present in Afghanistan. I saw NATO and their partners. So there are things that we got to fix. I think for U.S. military personnel, if you want to view it as a loss, that's okay. If you want to view it as, hey, we did our job and it sucks that the Afghans completely betrayed us and no one fucking fought, that's okay. You did your job. You should be pissed at the people higher up than you who made terrible decisions for the last 20 years. Afghanistan to me was very important because it's an area that I studied. It's an area where I sent a lot of reports to certain people. And from day one, it was a failure, logistically. We shifted resources from Afghanistan into Iraq. We were setting up bases in Afghanistan on the bottom of fucking hills. So the Taliban had clear height advantage and elevation advantage over U.S. troops. U.S. troops didn't have proper bases. They're like literally 2x4 boxes that they were making for them. No air conditioning, no nothing. They had basically those like pools that you see like, I don't know, in less affluent areas where like they just fill it up with water. They would fill those with ice, but much smaller, and put their waters in there. Soldiers would complain about coming out of their makeshift barracks, right, which housed like maybe 8 people, usually. And they said the Taliban would be shooting at these guys every time they wanted to take a piss or take a shit. Do you know how taxing that is on your psychology when you're trying to do the most humane, basic function in the world and you're worried about getting shot or blown up? So from day one, it was a failure. But yet, we were able to dominate the country with the minimal amount of resources we had. We didn't go in there with the best technology, the best training, and the best resources. No, we went in there and said, hey, you're going to carry this like can of water in an area that hasn't had rain in 5 years, and you're going to have to survive. And we did it. We did that. So on that end, no one should take that away from the people who served. But if you are angry, I completely empathize with you, and I understand why, because we see all this hard work we put in, and it went into complete waste. Like I said, $1 trillion were spent over the last 20 years in Afghanistan. Billions were spent in building their military. All for what? So that now they can export our knowledge with the Taliban to China? Right now, the United States has to really take a hard look at itself. I think we should view this as a loss. We should view this as if we lost the World Series, the NBA championship. We should view this as if we lost everything in the Olympics. We didn't get one gold medal. We should view this as a loss because our population needs to grow up and stop being a bunch of cupcakes and admiring people like the Kardashians. We have to view this as a loss because this is a definite blow to our nation. It's a blow to our ability to project our dominance in the world. It's a loss because everything that we use militarily, from a tactic standpoint, psychologically, it doesn't work anymore. And I think that's a good thing. I just don't know if the American population is ready for a loss. Because the generation of people that are in this country now are a generation of people who, they're trophy babies. They don't know how to comprehend loss. They're going to have to go and contact Hello Cat therapy for hours of endless therapy because we are not that resilient people that I was accustomed to seeing, which is why my family even came here. We are not that persistent nation in which we cheered the fucking loser to get back up and continue fighting. No, now when we fall, we go, oh, I need to go see my mom and dad. My mental health is broken. We never had these excuses 10, 20 years ago. That's not the Mamba mentality that Kobe Bryant tried teaching everybody on this planet. I think our Secretary of Defense needs to get fired. I think our heads of multiple intelligence agencies needs to get fired. I think anyone who's above the age of 60 in any branch of government, from the DOD to our various intelligence agencies, should all get fired. I think our Congress should have a limit as to how old they can be, because we're running a freaking retirement center for these people. They should all get fired. I mean, we have all these different services and groups in Congress. You have a budget committee, blah, 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 right? Not one person, you're telling me, knew about this? But I, on Cupcake Media with my staff, we know about this because we have better contacts in place. I mean, come on. This is a wake-up call. Our Congress has failed us. Our government has failed us. This is going to be very, very, very severe for us down the road. All these people should be fired. We've been too soft. I think one issue we have with our intelligence services, whether it's the DOD and our other branches, is you're going to have analysts and they're going to get some amazing raw data. I think those people have done, for the most part, a very good job. And if they haven't, someone needs to criticize their crappy work. But for the most part, I think they do a good job. What happens is the analyst gets it. They get the data. They write a report. They give it to whoever their commanding officers, right, or their superior. Then they see it. They might add things to it. They make it a little bit better, right? But then what happens is, as it gets higher up the chain, as it gets to the political intelligence, personnel, they have to take things out. And I think when you remove those things, when you remove certain words and pages, the severity of the situation gets watered down. And then you give it to a bunch of old farts in Congress who can barely walk, like Nancy Pelosi and even Mitch McConnell and all these, people. And you give it to members of our nursing home of a Congress. And now it's been so watered down that the severity isn't there anymore. I think that has to stop. I think right now we need to reevaluate how we're going to move forward. When I say the military textbook of the United States is a complete failure, there was a report released not too long ago, I believe it was in the Wall Street Journal, maybe a week or 2 weeks ago. It talked about how the U.S. military did a faux war as if China was about to invade Taiwan. And we got our asses kicked. We got our asses kicked. Bad. Essentially, Taiwan got conquered. That's what the report essentially entails, is that we were so underprepared, and our textbook reaction to things from the ally that was helping us conduct this war game was so, it was so easy to predict what we were going to do that we couldn't even help Taiwan if we wanted to. So this is a wake-up call for us as a nation. If we can't protect Taiwan in a fake war, how are we going to win the hearts and mind of a nation in a real war? I think moving forward, we have to assume that not everyone wants a democracy. That's the first thing. And if they don't want a democracy, is it our job to bring democracy to them, or is it our job to make their lives better by allowing them to choose the type of government they want? That's something to think about. I think we have to be careful as to, are we going to go there as conquerors, or are we going to go there as saviors? Because there's a fine line between the two. I think in Afghanistan, we had known that these people were corrupt. We should have taken them out ourselves, these elected officials. We should have put in an international peacekeeping force to handle the situation by removing these corrupt officials to ensure that this debacle of a mess would not happen. This mess in Afghanistan is going to have massive ramifications worldwide. I think moving forward, our playbook for intelligence services and our military, everything we have on the shelf, burn it. Completely useless in 2021. China already got the playbook 24 hours ago. Just checking my clock. They got the playbook 24 hours ago. They know exactly what we're going to do. They know exactly what we're going to do. They're like, we know so well what the United States will do that we're going to take the war to them and beat them on their own turf. If it comes down to it. And I hope it never does, because it'll be ugly for the world. But we need to throw away old ideologies. Like we need to throw away old congresswomen and congressmen. We need to get rid of ideas that we assumed worked from 1945 and we think they're prevalent today. It's like assuming that the telephone with the landline is the best form of communication when you got these guys, which are much more efficient and better. Imagine trying to run your empire, whatever your empire, so your business, your house, your life, on a landline when you're stuck on the 405 freeway. It would never happen. Or you're on a beach, hopefully, getting a nice tan with some beautiful people, right? It would never happen. Backwards thinking leads to backward results, which is what happened in Afghanistan. We put a lot of false trust and false belief that the Afghan people would be resilient. No, they're resilient towards the ideology of the Taliban. And yes, it is a shocker for most of you to believe that they were embracing these people, but they have. We've known about that problem. We know that the ideology war was something that we failed at, and now this ideology war is going to expand in other countries. So moving forward, Cupcakes, let's just recap some of this stuff. Congress, got to change them. Too old. They're all wearing diapers. It's literally a retirement home, a nursing center. Those people have to be removed because they are the main reason as to why we are in this mess. And most people have to realize, 20 years ago, all the members of Congress that you see that were part of this shit show are the same people in power today making shit show decisions. So remove people of Congress. I think the President of the United States should be held accountable for this humanitarian failure. Because if President Trump did this, and at Cupcake Media, we don't say what side we are on. We just like to be like Switzerland and present facts. The reality is, if he did this, someone would try to impeach him again and say you killed millions and millions of people. The same standard, if we're going to referee, should be held to our current president. He completely failed at this and was completely ignorant and stubborn, like most old people are, as to what would have happened. He is senile to have assumed that Afghanistan would have been okay. Third, if we're on number 3, and I apologize for losing count, our military must abandon whatever tactics and ideologies they have been comfortable using. We must completely move away from everything and approach things from a new lens. Maybe you need some young people like me to give some insight, because we don't have any innovation in our military. Screw the weaponry. I'm just talking about tactics. You can have the best weapons, but if you don't have any innovation as to how you're going to implement your strategic advantage on the field and globally, we're going to lose. We need to take our failures of Iraq and Afghanistan and really take that as the most beautiful thing to have happened so that we can display our dominance for the next 1,000 years. And on and on and on. We have to learn from our mistakes. We have to be okay with the fact that maybe we lost some parts of these wars, but only through failure can you become a winner. And it is time to heavily focus on where we messed up on. I think our heads of intelligence services need a big wake-up call, and those people need to get fired because they failed miserably at this. And if you want to come onto the show and talk about what your hurdles were, come onto the show. Because you know what? I can't be that much of an asshole to say you failed miserably, because chances are somebody probably didn't listen to you. But it'd be nice to get some insight on that. And we want to provide that opportunity to show what went wrong. Was it that people weren't taking the intelligence serious, or did people not care? So I will I will redress what I said, which is while I encourage certain people to get fired in our intelligence services, I can't be an asshole about it because I'm not in that room seeing exactly what's going on. So I'm giving an opportunity there for people to explain what happened. I think we should get ready for China to learn our playbook and for us to reevaluate how we're going to do our global dominance. And if the if the United States government thinks that by pulling out of Afghanistan so that we can focus on Asia is a smart move, it's only 30% smart, because now our nemesis and our adversaries have learned our playbook, and they're going to export all that knowledge to China and Indo-Asia and Asia-Pacific by giving our nemesis the ability to now compete against us for free. And that is why we need a full reevaluation of things. It is only going to make our job in securing Asia-Pacific and the entire Pacific theater is only going to make our job much harder now because we don't have a tactical advantage. We hope you really enjoyed that episode. Our hearts and minds go out to the Afghan people. We hope that, hey, maybe there might be some positive change out of this, but we shall wait. Time shall answer all the questions we have. And from a humanitarian side, what happened, it was just, there's no words for it. I'm speechless. Hopefully, as a world, we never make these mistakes again. On that bombshell note, have a lovely day. Please click subscribe. Tell your friends about us. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We hope to see you soon. Have a wonderful day. What the fuck going on, Willis? GCI, and I should go phone. Right at that in my bitch.